What is going on YouTube? Juju 1313 Edge Mindset here. Carter. My name is Carter. I have a name. My name is Carter. Ramble Central, right? This is, you have now tuned into ramble.com, Ramble 109.3 morning coffee drinking time here. This is Ramble, man. So I get a lot of heat because I know I've got an ADHD brain that just shoots all over and tangents, and I half finish my sentences in my mind and I don't say it all. I know it. That it is what it is. This one is for sure, though, a guaranteed Ramble video about Emerson knives. I want to talk about, who knows, all kinds of stuff. I want to talk about why do I like them? And the reason I pose that question like that, because it somewhat defies some logic to a certain degree. And I think other people feel the same. So some of this is just me trying to figure out, like, why do I like them? Because on paper, I really probably shouldn't, but I kind of do. As well as I want to touch on, like, I don't know, man. I overthink of things and knives, but when we talk about hard use, like what does hard use mean exactly? A lot of people, I would say most people limit the term hard use to just the object, right? Like they say, oh, well, how much punishment can this object take? Based on the steel, how thick it is, the construction, the lock. Everyone's talking about locks. It's got to be a strong lock. Lock. However, I would say hard use extends beyond that, and it also extends into how easy it is to replace parts and service said knife, right? To me, in fact, you could argue that's a bigger piece, because at the end of the day, no matter what steel you have, we're starting with this, baby, I guess. I don't know, that's where we're going. That's the rabbit hole we're going down. Regardless of the steel you get, regardless of the maker or how it's constructed or how strong the lock is, regardless of any of those things, this is a finite resource, right? It's a mechanical object. And honestly, no matter what lock it is, I don't care, axis lock, ram lock, button lock, frame lock, regardless, it's a finite resource and it's going to wear out. It's a mechanical object. The more you open it, the more you lock it, the more you mess with it, it's going to wear out. But in particular is the blade. It doesn't matter if it's 3V or 154cm or 440C. It's a finite resource. You only get so many cuts with it. You only get so many sharpenings with it. And the blade is done. And essentially, knife blades don't have as much life realistically in them that I think a lot of people think. And it depends on the type of knife. If it's a high grind, a high hollow grind, you'll get a lot more edge life out of it. Something like this won't last very long, because as you move this edge up by sharpening, it's going to get thicker and thicker and thicker. Not going to be that good of a cutter. So it's a finite resource. So that in my mind, if you're talking about real practical hard use, there's a fine line between accepting this as being what it is and understanding that this blade is only going to last so long and it needs to be replaced. And what makes it easily to replace is not having it be super expensive, because both Strider and Emerson have amazing warranties. This is obviously way more expensive to service than this knife. If this lock goes out, there's a couple options. You can mess with the pins. If it's something really bad, you've got to either replace the blade or replace the whole lock side. This is a thick slab of titanium. It's got these cool, pretty tiger stripes on here, which is all work that has to be done. It's all nice and contoured. You may look at this knife and say, oh, it's kind of a garagey, kind of gritty type made thing. Really, there's a lot of work, a lot of melted edges here, thick titanium with scallops cut into it. There's a lot of work here. So replacing this lock side is expensive, and there's work, and it's going to take longer to get this fixed, and they're going to be less likely to jump to those conclusions. They're going to try, if you send this in, they're going to try to do everything else possible to fix your knife before replacing this lock side. This one is not the case. It's relatively thin titanium. There's no fancy cutouts. It's very rough finished. You send this in because you're having a lock issue, it's worn out or whatever. they just throw a new lock side in there, get it back to you in 2 weeks. Turnaround on Emerson customer service is much faster than Strider. Strider will take care of you 100%, but it'll just take longer. Essentially 1 week for a 1 month. You'll get this back in a couple weeks. You might get this back in a couple months, maybe 3 weeks, 3 months, depending on what it is and how busy and things like that. And that's not because Emerson cares more about its customers. It's because their product is built to be serviced easier, faster, and cheaper, right? Like Emerson did that on purpose because he knows you're supposed to use the crap out of this thing. It's easy to sharpen. It's not going to break the blade in half. When you need to fix it, you just send it in and they slap a new blade on, they slap a new lock side on, whatever they got to do, and they get it back to you and you get up and running again. Whereas this knife, yes, I would say because of its construction and steel, isn't going to wear out as fast. This steel is going to last a lot longer. It's also more difficult to sharpen. This lock is going to last longer. However, when you do have to send it in, it's going to take more time. So I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm just saying they're kind of equal, just in different ways. And it kind of changes the philosophy of hard use, right? This knife is meant if you go out into the wilderness or on deployment or whatever, you make sure it's in good working order, you make sure it's sharp, and because of the steel and the construction, it should get you all the way through so that you don't have to sharpen this out in the field because it's heat treated to a good, hard degree, an adequate degree. It's using modern, fancy steels. So the hope is that this will get you all the way through what you're doing so that you don't have to worry about it while you're out there. However, if something happens and you do have to worry about this, you need to sharpen this thing. Good luck. Unless you brought diamond stones, it's going to be very difficult. Let me take a sip of coffee. It's going to be very difficult to service this guy from a knife sharpening standpoint, right? Lock issues, I think, are, those are what they are, and there's not a lot you can do. This one, on the other hand, this one is meant that you can sharpen out in the field. Find a rock, find the bottom of a coffee mug to hone. A lot of different options. This steel is a lot softer. Not only is it softer by nature, 154 cm, but they heat treat it a little bit soft. So yes, this is going to dull on you quicker, but you can also sharpen this up on just about anything. You can have just regular stones, sharpening stones, which are easier to get than diamond stones. And anybody that is experienced and worked on sharpening knives, the stark difference. Striders are difficult to sharpen, man. These are hard. Their heat treat is one of the best in the industry, if not the best in the industry. And it takes a lot of work. Like I work up a sweat. If I'm doing a reprofile on a Strider, obviously not just touching it up or something. If I'm really trying to maybe lay back the edge or something, and especially if it's a thicker one than kind of this slicer one, this is a little bit more of a serviceable, usable type knife. Anyways, I'm using my diamond stones on my sharpening system, and I'm breaking a sweat kind of getting this thing reprofiled. Not this one exactly, but you know what I mean. Whereas on this, it would be a breeze, like easy peasy. I'm done. I'm ready to move on. So this one is meant more of a take it with you, and you can manage this thing out in the field. You don't need diamond stones. You don't need a sharpening system. You can make it work for you. Like I said, one's not better than the other. They're just different kind of philosophies of use, I guess you would say. So, and I've said this before in my old Emerson videos, part of what you're buying here is the warranty. It's the servicing. It's you can use this thing and they'll get you right, and they'll get you right quick. And that's kind of not really a thing anymore to most of the popular knife people out there. Hold on. I don't really hear people talk about even warranties, especially in kind of the younger generation that are into kind of the Chinese-produced knives that are so popular right now, kind of the fidgety slicer ones. Warranty and servicing your knife don't seem to really be a concern. And I know I can hear them screaming in the comments, well, that's because our knives are built so well, they don't need to be serviced. And there might be a little bit of legitimacy to that, but I think it's also that the knife using community, I think, is kind of changed. A lot of people that gravitate towards Emersons and even Striders are, I mean, obviously there's some military and stuff like that, but they're tradesmen, you know, electricians, plumbers, construction workers, people that use their stuff hard. And people that gravitate towards Emerson, generally speaking, other than, you know, people that just like the history and kind of the cool designs and the philosophy and the community, is the fact that they know they're going to beat the crap out of their knife. Like, you know, maybe they don't want to spend $500 on a knife because they're like, it's going to get disgusting. It's going to get beat up. I'm going to break up the blade. It's going to happen. I'm going to chip it. I'm going to snap the tip, you know, whatever it is. It's going to happen. Why would I invest $500 into a knife and then I've got to send it in and I won't see it for months? You know, they'd rather be like, well, I can get this for $220 or whatever and beat the crap out of it. And if I break it, send it in, they'll send it back in a couple weeks, all fixed up, new blade, new lock, whatever the case may be. They tend to gravitate towards more knives like this. This is really just it's a user, man. It's a use it up, beat the crap out of it, send it in, they'll take care of it. But there's also something else going on here. I can't quite put my finger on it. Something about Emerson knives, I always kind of come back to them. I don't know, they're ugly, but they're beautiful. I like all the normal stuff, right? I've got a nice custom Persian here. I've got a couple of videos on that. I like all the normal stuff that people like with Emersons. You know, I like the history. I like the designs. I like his profile designs are just so amazing. There's something that works with this knife. I'm not the hugest, biggest recurve fan, but there's something about this one. I just like, you know, some of his original ones, the CQC 6, 7, 8, Commander. Those are like my top silhouettes of all time. There's just something about it. And I actually like the kind of garage-built aesthetic to Emerson knives. Like, they feel DIY, they feel kind of punk rock, they feel anti-corporation, anti-big business, right? Like, to me, this is the opposite of, like, Spyderco. I love Spyderco, they're great, good people. But, man, I see their knives and I just think, man, it just feels like it's churned out by a machine, you know? Which, I mean, they are. High quality, made really well, and like I said, luckily, Spyderco is good people. And I like him, but it just doesn't have the same feel. Like, to me, this feels like, you know, and that's essentially how it started, right? And that's what's kind of cool about all of these. I know, you know, Strider, Hinderer, Emerson have somewhat fallen out of favor now because of various reasons. But it's really cool because they looked at what was currently available in the market, which were mass-produced, cheaply built folders that were, you know, gas station knives, essentially, were the most common to the most regular people. You had two basic camps of knives, especially folding knives back then. You had cheap, mass-produced knives that were kind of flimsy and kind of dorky, and you could just buy them wherever. And then you had really expensive, super fancy custom knives. The custom knives back before this era were all dress knives, you know, mother of pearl, really expensive, meteorite, fancy materials, art knives. There wasn't anything like this in the market. And so they saw that and they were like, we think there's something here. And so they grassroots campaign, they came up with designs, they built stuff in their garages, they made connections, they went to shows, and they sold these knives, and they kind of came up from the bottom up, right? They didn't reach out to Spyderco or Benchmade and say, hey, I've got a design, can we make it? They did it themselves, all alone. And that's not really a thing anymore. You know, now people kind of just design things on CAD. They get money, basically crowdfunding, to say, hey, we need to get 100 orders, and then we can have some Chinese OEM make our knife. And then if they get enough money, they make the knife. If they don't get enough money, they say, oh, we didn't get enough money. Here's your money back, right? They're not buying machinery and setting it up in their garage and figuring out how to make knives and going to shows, doing demonstrations. It's all kind of removed from that. They design the thing and they send it to an OEM and they get it made and they ship it out. I'm not saying there's not work there. I'm just saying it's just not the same, you know, and some people don't care about that stuff. But when I see these things, I feel that story, kind of. You know, I know they're just knives, whatever. But that's kind of why I like Striders and Emersons, because I I feel that history. I feel that heart. I feel that soul of where they came from, how they started, and also their impact. I think a lot of new knife people see these as just like, the whole tactical thing or the whole heavy use folder thing. And I think they kind of discount their contributions to the knife community as a whole, just because a lot of what these guys pioneered and a lot of what these guys put forward and a lot of the things these guys changed is just so common now that it's hard to imagine it not being part of the knife community. And I think there's essence of this that are moving, even the fidgety, slicey thing that's super popular right now. There's a lot of stuff that was informed directly and indirectly by these kind of makers to kind of get where we are now. And I think some of that's lost. Obviously it would be. Why wouldn't it be? You know, a lot of these new knife people weren't around during this time. They didn't see this stuff grow. It's super exciting, like super exciting times when these things were happening and popping off. And, you know, Strider went from just going to a few shows and cutting up tables with their knives to show how strong they are to being a pretty big kind of popular knife producer, all grassroots, all on their own. You know, they didn't get some giant company to back them. There was no involvement from overseas investment companies that are like, yeah, you know, we invest in small companies and try to make a return. It was all just DIY for them, by them, punk rock style. We're making knives different than what's out there. We're doing it on our own. We need your help. And they were able to do it. I don't know if that's even possible now. Maybe. It's hard to say. Like, I don't know if a company like Strider could ever happen again in America the way they did it. I don't know if it's possible. Maybe. It may be one of those snaps in time that we just never get back to. So anyways, yeah, I told you it was going to be rambly. I don't know if anyone's still hanging on here, but I always follow the same kind of trajectory with knives. Because I'll oftentimes, sadly, kind of exit the community and get into other things. And then I come back, and it's like, all these cool knives, and I check them all out, and you know, I get Microtechs, I get just the new stuff that's out that everyone's into. I check them out, do a lot of reviews. And then I always end up getting back into Striders. I realize that Striders are super expensive. So then I start looking at Emersons again, and I'm always like, nah, I don't want to get into Emersons. And then I buy an Emerson, and I like it because to me, there's a lot of overlap between these two knives, despite the fact that people don't seem to really be into both too much. Seems like you're kind of one or the other, and I think that comes down to the frame lock thing. A lot of people are super anti-liner lock, and so they may like kind of the idea of Emerson, but they just can't get down with the liner lock, which I kind of get. But I also think it's a little over. I don't think it's as big a deal as people think, and I think the liner lock, when done right, is stronger than people think. And also, you know, there's the concept of you should never treat a folder like a fixed blade anyways. So the strength of the lock shouldn't really be in question, because essentially you should always treat the lock as simply a way to keep the blade up from falling down. You should never consider it as a way to protect it from closing, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You should always treat a folding knife like it's a slip joint, essentially. This lock is simply meant to keep this blade in an upright position, so as you're cutting, as you're using it, it's not falling down and you have to like keep holding it up. Should never be considered as a way to actually turn this into a fixed blade. And that's what it used to be, right? That's why back in the day, wow, I'm getting off. Back in the day, there wasn't really a big push in making liner lock stronger, because it was never considered to be a way to turn this into a fixed blade. Back in the 2010s, we got on this big tangent, right? Right now, it's all slicey, fidgety. Back then, it was lock strength, man. Like, there was a race to have the strongest lock. Which one's better? Which geometry? Which materials? That was the big thing back then, along with kind of thick blades. Crazy to think that when this knife came out, it was considered a behemoth of thickness. It's still pretty thick, but this kind of goes back to what I was saying with how these have informed modern knives. This was a very thick stock blade. Like, When this came out, this was like, oh my gosh, you could pry a door open with this. Look how thick that is. Now it's, yeah, I mean, it's not a thin blade, but it's not that. I mean, I don't think anyone would look at this and be like, oh, wow, look how thick that stock is. You know, there's obviously thinner, slicier knives, but at one time, this was considered like an amazingly overbuilt, robust knife. Now it's fairly standard. It's on the stronger side, I guess, but it's not anything that would really... Anyways. Where was I going before this? I completely lost my train of thought. Yeah, I was talking about old stuff, lock strength. Oh, yeah, locks, liner locks. And then, but now, you know, like a lot of things, the triad lock, the Omega, or the Axis lock, now the Ram lock, has kind of, you know, when those kind of came out, now all of a sudden it is like, wow, I don't know, can a folding knife kind of be like a fixed blade? Like, we really kind of figured out how to make folding knife locks really, really strong. And so that has kind of made this seem like, ooh, I don't know, liner lock? Ugh. There's so many other locks that are available. You know, it would be kind of cool if this had like a ram lock in it or something of that nature. That would be pretty cool. I would like to see that. When we're talking liner lock versus frame lock, though, and maybe I'll do a separate video on this, I think people think there's far more difference than there really is. I think people think this is like 10x as strong as a liner lock. It's like, no. Potentially, it may be weaker than a liner lock, depending on how it's implemented. You know, there's definitely some benefits to the frame lock, but I think people kind of over, whatever the word I'm trying to think of, over kind of examine, or they're overconfident in the frame lock because it looks like it's so much stronger. But my experience and logically thinking, I don't think it's as that much robust as people think. But anyways, okay, wow, I've really gone off. Nobody's still watching, so you guys take it easy. I don't even know what I'm going to title this video, like Ramble, Rant, Emerson, Strider, History of Knives in the World, and why do I like Emerson knives, even though I didn't really answer that question. I didn't even touch on all the points that I wanted to go through on that topic, but this video's gone on way too long. So you guys take it easy. I'll talk to you later. I'm out.